Greetings folks, Kilt-Man here, hope you're doing well. On location, in the living room. And where better than the living room to discuss Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead. I'm comfortable. The Blu-ray is actually bubbling away in the background behind you. And yeah, let's get on. Lucio Fulci, of course, we all know him, we all love him. The diminutive little ogre of Italian splatter. He'd made his name with westerns, with comedies, with sex dramas and stuff. This guy had done everything. And then, of course, he went into giallo and the zombie movie. The zombie movie came about because of George A. Romero's spectacular sequel to Night of the Living Dead, 1978's Dawn of the Dead. And of course, the Italians were no slouches at trying to, leap on the bandwagon. And they leapt with gusto, gutsy gusto as it turned out, with their own slew of zombie epics. Fulci, of course, we all know and love him. This was the master of the macabre. The Benny Hill, he looks like Benny Hill, he really does, of Italian splatter movies. Now, his films, they're easy to dismiss as being, they don't make any sense, the acting's terrible, the script's diabolical, it's just full of maggots and ridiculous, surreal set pieces and just ultra-violence. Yeah, can't argue with any of that. But of course, peppered throughout all of these meandering, ridiculous plots and crazy characters are moments of sheer visual and atmospheric brilliance. When he did things well, he did them better than anybody else did our mate Lucio. And what we're going to discuss today is the first of his notorious apocalypse trilogy, which was this one, City of the Living Dead, aka Gates of Hell for those of you in America, followed up by The Beyond, followed up by The House by the Cemetery. Zombie Flesh may have been the foretelling of the apocalypse, but it certainly wasn't part of this particular brand of trilogy, because these films took in Lovecraft, they took in Edgar Allan Poe, they took in macabre haunted houses and Southern Gothic, as well as having zombies in there as well. Now this one, made in 1980 and starring Katrina McCall from England and the great American B-movie champion Christopher George from Grizzly and from Pieces and from The Exterminator and Kampuchea Express, didn't get on with our mate Lucio. Lucio Fulci called him that dog of an actor. Possibly because, he tended to bark a lot and he's got a very gruff sort of voice, and he would fight back against Lucio and his weird kind of bullying tactics, especially with his female cast members. Anyway, City begins with the suicide by hanging of a priest, Father Thomas, in the cemetery of Dunwich, old Dunwich town, which is built on the ruins, the ash of Salem, Massachusetts. And in so doing, he will unleash an unspeakable evil, which will make the dead rise from the grave and cause bedlam and mayhem and all sorts of carnage and spookiness on All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day being the day after Halloween. Curiously, although everyone's racing against time to stop the bowels of the earth breaking open and all the caskets being thrown asunder as the dead will rise and walk again, no one mentions Halloween at all. When most of the action's set on Halloween night, hey, that's a little aside there. Also, it's set mostly in this town of Dunwich, which is a Lovecraftian name, which is meant to be in Salem, Massachusetts. It's actually filmed in Savannah, Georgia. And boy, can you tell, although the cinematography and the set design and the locations are supremely atmospheric, lots of tracking shots of these old colonial houses with dust trails, flowing past, and tumbleweeds and this kind of stuff, and leaves blowing everywhere, trees sinisterly, wafting in the wind. But those trees are all those kind of weird ones you get from the swamplands. So it don't look like nothing like Salem, Massachusetts is going to look like. Plus you've got all the creature sounds of the birds and the insects down, the southern states. But hey, Lucio doesn't care about things like that, accuracy and things. He also films in New York as well, because this suicide of this priest is witnessed by Catriona MacColl, who plays a psychic. And during a seance in New York, she witnesses what takes place, and she will know that, no, the dead will come back to life and terrorise the living. We must stop this. And then she has what appears to be a fear-induced heart attack, and she'll keel over and collapse, dead. And then she'll be buried. But looking into this comes Christopher George, playing this investigative journalist, who, well, because he can't really get any story because she's dead and no one's telling him anything, he goes and visits her grave in a rather fantastic location which overlooks, you know, all of Manhattan in the background. Fulci liked doing that. He liked setting the scene so that you knew he was in America. You knew he was in New York, and it's great. Two grave diggers can't be arsed covering up her grave, so Christopher George wanders over and, well, kind of just takes in the sepulchral air of the place. And as he walks away, he hears, is that someone screaming? Someone, you know, trying to break free from that grave? No, it can't be. No. Walks on. Someone's gasping, scratching at the inside of a casket. Someone is in that. And they are alive and trying to get out. Because the psychic has awoken in her grave, in her casket, and in a wonderful little shot, you will see the rose that she's clutching in her once dead hands is beginning to wilt and crumble as the last of the oxygen in the casket is being dwindled away. And she begins to scratch, doing her nails at the inside, choking. So what does our boy do? Someone's alive in there, gets a pickaxe, fucking brings it down like a madman. And inside, in a very Hitchcockian moment, the axe is just missing her head by millimetres. She's screaming. And then finally he'll prise, a big chunk of the casket open, and you'll see her screaming face in there, trying to get air back. God, she's alive. Let's just think about that for 1 second. He's now sussed on that someone is alive within this grave. So what does he go and do? A fucking big pickaxe. Boosh. Why not just prise the fucking lid off the thing? Don't swing it down where her head's going to be. She's alive now, but not for much longer with your valiant efforts to, help her escape. Jesus Christ, man. So, then begins their little journey, cross-country, to go to this New England town of Dunwich, where, yes, things are now getting very, very ghoulish and gruesome. The dead certainly seem to be coming back to life. Visions of this priest with red ringed eyes, looking very, very like Christopher Lee as Dracula, very, very similar. He will appear and he will put the mesmer stare on certain victims. Most notably and famously, the poor girl in the car who's been making out with her friend, who's played by Michelle Sovi, who will go on to make The Church and The Sect and Delamore, or Delamorte, however it's pronounced. Cemetery Man. And he puts the stare on her, and then she will then proceed to vomit up the sum total of her inner organs. Oh dear God, what a shocking sequence that is. The poor actress, who dies in a few of Fulci's movies, always in spectacularly gruesome ways, actually had real butcher's offal crammed into her mouth, and she would then let it slowly ooze out of her gob. And a lot of this stuff is then tripe and innards and things bedecked in blood, and she spews it all out in a long lingering sequence of just stomach churning effects. Then you'll cut to what's quite clearly a dummy's head, and with a pump, all the real tripey intestines go out. So this girl's turned herself inside out. Poor old Michelle Sovi sitting next to her, it can't really do much to help her. Tries to get out, can't get out. And then this zombie hand will emerge from the back of the car, and with superhuman strength. How strong are your fingers? Because these dead fingers can apparently crush craniums, breaks into the skull, squeezes the brains, and in a kind of reverse scalping, takes the back of his head off and a bit of his brain oozes out and kaboosh, down he goes. And this becomes a bit of a modus operandi for the zombies in this, because you will see 2 more people have their brains literally grabbed out of the back of their skull. So really super strong fingers. But this film doesn't just dwell on uber violence. There's a lot of Lovecraftian supernatural shenanigans taking place. The dead are returning to life. The mortician, who's got a casket full of these people, and he's taking the knives, the rings and the watches off these things, and off these corpses. Well, he's going to get his comeuppance. He's going to get his hand chomped by one of them. Then corpses will suddenly appear in the homes where they once dwelt. A little boy is terrorised by his reanimated dead sister, who chows down on his parents, and he will then be terrorised by her. There's lots of this ghoulishness taking place. Fulci is, I'd say, more restrained. His film is incredibly violent, but he's a bit more restrained than we saw him in Zombie Flesh Eaters, which was no holds barred and purely ferocious. But his filmmaking and his storytelling is at its most fearless. He doesn't give a rat's ass about, do things make sense, any kind of continuity. It doesn't matter one iota. He just wants to pummel you with oodles of atmosphere, this macabre, draped in dread and ominous sense of foreboding atmosphere, and literally smack you between the eyes with some sensational imagery, which, once seen, you will never forget. The aforementioned vomit roller coaster, the brain oozing stuff, the chomping that takes place. You have poor old Bob, played by regular Italian supporting actor Giovanni Lombardo Radice, I think his name is, aka John Morgan. His name was always John Morgan in the credits, and on all European and American prints. And in this, he plays Bob, who is quite clearly a very disturbed young gentleman who no one seems to like. We learn he's lured a young girl into the woods at some point, and only they got to her just in time to save her from a fate worse than death. And they blame Bob for all the things going on. Now, Bob has a blow-up rubber doll, a sex toy, in this abandoned shack. He's periodically visited not only by the visions of the dead priest and by other zombified, cadavers strolling around, but also by various young teens who seem drawn to this guy, who's quite clearly got, paedophile tendencies and is clearly a danger. But, anyway. Another girl's found dead. The blame is basically thrust upon poor Bob. He hides in someone's garage in their car. Their daughter comes to see him. "Hi, Bob. Hey, want to smoke a joint?" Her dad then suddenly appears, chases her out. A little tussle ensues between him and Bob. They hit the button and the lathe, the big drill lathe, starts whirring around. And so begins the next most notorious sequence from City of the Living Dead, when poor old Bob... Have I had a swig of this yet? I haven't, have I? 1 second. Poor old Bob is dragged onto the lathe, and in a sequence very similar to the infamous splinter in the eye from Zombie Flesh Eaters, he is dragged slowly towards that revolving drill. And we'll see that coming closer and closer and closer to what appears to be his eyeball. But at the last minute, he turns his head and it will go in an unbreakable shot through his gob, and then this guy won't give up and drives his head right the way through on this drill bit, and then you're going to see it come out the other side. Fabulous effect from Gianetto De Rossi, who was, of course, Fulci's go-to guy for gore. Now, interesting fact here, there are 2 Gino De Rossis who worked for Fulci, both special effects guys. Gianetto De Rossi, I've written about this film and all of Fulci's films at length on AV forums many years ago. I mean, really massive essay tomes I wrote, full of research and everything. And now I've forgotten a lot of details, because I'm getting older now, and I've drunk a lot of whiskey since then. But Gianetto de Rossi did, in 1974, the fabulous zombie movie, one of my all-time favourites, which I will cover at some point, The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, aka The Living Dead, aka Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. And this was a real sort of European answer to George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. So the flesh-eating zombies were in there, but whereas Romero's film didn't really have a lot of gore to it. It was gory for its time, it pushed boundaries, but it certainly wasn't, it was black and white. For this, Living Dead at Manchester Morgue was colour, and Gianetto de Rossi, who worked on City Living Dead and Zombie Flesh Eaters for definite, had, you know, lots of latex flesh being torn out and people being devoured. Very, very gory effects. But there's another guy called Gino de Rossi whose effects are nowhere near as good. And he did things like Burial Ground and, oh God, I can't remember what else. But he did one of Fulci's films, and I think, is it New York Ripper? I think it's New York Ripper. But did he do one of the zombie ones as well? I can't quite remember. But anyway, de Rossi, the Gianetto, the full original one, did this movie, and his effects are superlative. I would say his zombie effects aren't quite as good because they appear to be here just people with maggots and grunge just stuck, slapped on their faces, bits sticking off there. Whereas in Flesh Eaters, my God, they are the best looking undead that have ever graced the screen. Whereas Romero's would have like what looks like a bit of blue or green emulsion undercoat, Gianetto de Rossi could create fabulously rotten, decomposed, just these have come out of the earth and you can almost smell them, you know, coming off the screen. It's a stench of putrefaction and death, and they are really, you know, a grisly sight to behold. But I say in this one, they don't look quite like that. They look a bit like they've had just pizza shoved on their face. Remember the girl from John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, who just becomes a pizza face and she's trying to bring Satan back through from the mirror? Well, they don't even look as good as that. But the gore effects themselves are sensational. That drill bit, you know, that's fantastic. The vomiting of the innards and the brains getting just crunched out of, you know, people's heads, fantastic. The acting, yeah, there's weirdness here aplenty. The script makes no sense. The whole inclusion of Christopher George and Catriona MacColl as the psychic and the investigative journalist, when they finally arrive in Dunwich, they will meet up with this psychologist guy, who is ostensibly the hero of the piece. He's got a bit of background as to what's going on, and they will all sort of meet up in the cemetery because they fathom out that, look, they're going to have to find and destroy this undead priest, Father Thomas, and put an end to this chaos that's going to bring the dead out and, you know, bring the apocalypse forth upon mankind on All Saints' Day. So they're going to have to get inside the grave and go underground and find this guy. And so begins a great but also kind of lackluster climax. It's visually superb, but emotionally, and you know, does it provide a satisfying conclusion to the film? No, not really, because it's kind of over and done with. You've got an extensive creeping through this catacomb of, you know, corpses. The brilliant design is that once you've got underground in this graveyard, above you, it's like the reverse of what's above. So the dead are above you, and they're all hanging down out of the bottom of their caskets. Arms and legs and skeletons and stuff are everywhere, and it's a little labyrinth, a warren of these catacombs. And of course, once they're in there, the dead are beginning to rise and sort of shamble around and find them. And of course, the priest will suddenly spring up as well, and he'll put that mesmer stare on Catriona MacColl, who will then begin to drip blood from her eyes. Very striking image. And you know, you think, oh, she's going to start vomiting up as well. But no, this psychologist guy, curly-headed, bearded guy, looks around and he'll find like an old crucifix from, you know, a cross from a grave, and he'll just plunge it through this priest's decomposed guts, and his entrails will then be set ablaze because. So he will then burn and roast, and then all the zombies will burn and roast. And that's kind of it, really. But then you get to the shock, horror, ambiguous, bizarre, confusing ending, which I love, by the way, because it really is a head scratcher. They will get out the grave, they will clamber up through the grave and get back, and it's All Saints Day, and it's daylight. And the little lad I mentioned before, who's been terrorised by his sister and his parents have been devoured, he will arrive in a police car, and he's got to know these people as well, albeit for only literally about half an hour the night before. And he'll shout, Mary, Mary, barely even knows the girl, Mary, Jerry, Mary, Jerry. And as he runs towards them, it will turn to slow motion. And their relieved faces will turn to, no. And then you'll hear this scream. And the screen will freeze frame. And then a big animated spiderweb cracking of the lens will fill the screen, as clearly all their endeavours have gone for nothing because it is the end of the world. Well, there you go. Reassuring. So the film makes no sense, but it doesn't matter. This is Fulci unleashing his gothic sensibilities. You have these beautiful atmospheric shots, these old colonial buildings take on a life of their own. The characters wander in and out of bizarre scenarios, but the overall sense of dread is really, really inked in blood, sweat and tears, and it's fabulously, evocative of doom and gloom. Christopher George, his character enters into it, and I love this guy. I've always loved Christopher George. I love him, first of all, from the film Grizzly, I've covered it before in a previous video, and I think he's terrific. But he doesn't have a clue why he's in this film. He just barks his lines out, and he's got this smile on his face. He's like, I haven't got a fucking clue what this is about. That little weird guy behind the camera, he's being a tit to everybody, but he ain't gonna piss me off because I'm just gonna throw right back in his face. And perhaps because of this attitude, he's written out in a very sort of anticlimactic, yet still spectacular fashion, because when they're down the catacombs, he's gonna get his brains ripped out as well. And there's a weird thing for you. These zombies have a strange ability to teleport. One of them even takes a spectacular leap off a bridge to threaten and intimidate this poor little lad who's running for his life down these fabulously gothic streets, these nocturnal, deserted streets, full of mist and leaves and stuff like. And he just takes this weird, bizarre leap, and then and just arrives into the kid and grabs him. Previously, you've seen this lad's sister take out another girl who you thought was going to be one of the heroines. And she's underneath, they go up the flight of stairs to go to the front door of the house, and as the camera follows them up, it will zero in on these undead eyes looking between the stairs, and they've gone up above them. And yet, somehow, even from where she is, her hand manages to come in out of one side of the screen and take this girl's brains out, and the little lad run off. And the same thing happens, because that girl that's just had her brains snaffled will return in the catacombs. Her name's Sandra, very beautiful girl as well, very, very attractive young lady. And she will appear in the catacombs, and she'll walk towards our ostensible heroes, and Jerry will go, Sandra, because they recognise her. And yet she's walking towards them. Christopher George, Katrina McCall, Jerry, don't know his real name, standing there, she's walking towards them, and all of a sudden, their fucking hand will come out the back and take out Christopher George's brains. And you see, they're very small brains, I've got to be honest. Brains are bigger than this. And the two halves of his brains, like, and whatever hemisphere it is, and one will go ooze, and just a little stringy bit of gristle will fold out, and then rats will nibble on his ripped up scalp and brain tissue. But how the hell did a hand get from round there when she used to... It doesn't pay to think too much about Fulci's movies in a kind of, linear fashion and, objective fashion. They don't work on that kind of level. They're nightmares put on screen. And in that capacity, they're just unparalleled. The imagery and their mood are just, fabulous. What else can I say about this? It isn't my favourite of Fulci's classic, run of movies, which has still forever remained for me to be Zombie Flesh Eaters, which was is just awesome. on every capacity. Let me just turn that off because I had the Blu-ray was playing behind us there, and it was the title screen and it was playing a bit of the music just to get in the mood, and it's now given up and just turned itself off. It's just given up on me. But anyway, you know, cheers, folks. City Living Dead there, Gates of Hell poster, same movie. This version that I'm discussing, by the way, is this lavish new box set from Arrow Video. It really is a fabulous edition. Not only is that box just fucking incredible, you have so many gorgeous new extras on it. It's been released before. Arrow themselves released it earlier, another version. This is now from a 4K scan, and yeah, you can see some differences definitely. There was always problems with the grain, how the grain was manifested on some of these transfers, and it looked frozen and crystalline and really bright because it'd been overly sharpened. Now this looks far more filmic. It's very grainy in places, but the film itself, close-ups, and of course this is a film, it's Italian, and Fulci, like every Italian filmmaker, would zoom in on eyes and, you know, lots of ferocious close-ups, you know, and whip crack edits and zooms and crash bang wallop zooms, and it's just, you know, but this looks really good. It looks by far the best that I've seen it, and you know that speaks dividends. If you're a fan, please do get hold of this, especially for the raft of extras that are on it. You know, definitely, you know, make it well worth your time. As it's been out, released many times. I've had it all over the years. I've had Betamax, VHS, the old. Actually, this film was never banned. This managed to get away from being banned. All of his other ones seem to hit the DPP list and become like infamous video nasties. But City was never actually banned, despite its incredible violence. Although it was cut down, though, the drill through the brain was always cut. Basically, you just saw it go. It just reached his side of his head, and it'd go, and he'd go, ah, and then it would just cut away, and that would be it. But nothing else, I don't think, was cut out of it. I don't recall. All the girl turning herself inside out, that was always there, always complete. Fulci's movies, when I was a kid, they were a bit of a rite of passage. You had to go through them. Well, and it was me that found them and then tried to make my friends sit and watch them. And I'll give them their due, you know, they sat through them, but they did skip the hell out of them as well. Like the dubbing was always pissing them off. The script made no sense, and you know they would reluctantly afterwards go, yeah, I quite enjoyed that, but you know, it was still fucking insane, and I'd rather watch, you know, George Romero's zombie movies, or I'd rather watch Halloween or The Evil Dead. You know, at least they make sense. But over the years, and I understood their misgivings, and over the years I've come to terms with the brilliance of Fulci, alongside the absolute lunacy of his scripting, of a lot of his direction, a lot of his storytelling skills, which are so lacking in every sort of, you know, capacity. But when he does things well, he's untouchable. He's up there. You know, he is fearless when it comes to what his vision is going to be. He doesn't care. He'll have if you're going to have actors covered in maggots for a particular scene, I'm going to get a fucking ton of real, wriggly, live maggots. And I'm going to get a wind fucking machine and I'm going to blow them into their faces. And they're going to stand there, take after take, and fucking take this. And you'll see one girl throwing up, you know, and they will be. The maggots are in their eyes, up their nose, in their mouth. He doesn't give a shit. He's going to put his actors through hell. And I mean, it's not quite freaking slapping someone in The Exorcist to get the best reaction, and doing or Kubrick doing take after take after take, with poor old Shelley Duvall in The Shining, you know. But this guy will threaten, and he will have tantrums. And if you ever see this guy, I said before, he's the Benny Hill of Italian splatter, and he's a dead ringer. Put a little scratchy, itchy beard on Benny Hill, and you've got him. And he's a pipe smoker. He also other cameos, because he did fancy himself as the Italian Hitchcock. So, and you'll see him in this as I think the coroner. And he did a lot of these little walk-on 5-second parts just to throw his face in there as well. And you know, God love the little guy. I think he's terrific. A lot of his actors don't have good things to say about him, but but a lot of them do. If they got on with him, they got on with him. If they didn't, oh, there was hell to pay. The script in this, you've got people saying things like, "What the dickens? What the dickens?" And they'll see like some shredded corpse there and a big pile of maggots and some desiccated, decomposed flesh, and they'll go, "My goodness, what the fuck is that about?" Anyway, folks, this is the start of my Fulci celebration. I'm not doing it in order. I'm just dipping in, as and when. In fact, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave zombie flesh eaters for the big, flesh-ripping finale of this celebration, of this festival of Fulci. And so the next one will probably be The Beyond or House by the Cemetery. Can't quite make up my mind. They all have fabulous attributes. They all have moments of glorious, gory grandeur. They all have incredibly daft, silly, what the fuck moments. Crazy editing, which, a scene will just end. A music cue will just end, Oh, another thing. Fabio Frizzi scores 3 of these movies. Flesh Eaters, this, and The Beyond. Walter Rizzi, I think, did House by the Cemetery. And they're all incredible scores. Whereas Dario Argento, the other Italian horror auteur, would use Goblin quite a lot and became very synonymous with the use of Goblin. Fabio Frizzi became the musical muse of Lucio Fulci, and his scores are evocative, bit of synth, orchestral, very catchy rhythms, infamously catchy, and good little earworms. And his scores for I would say this and Flesh Eaters are classics of their own particular style and genre. Walter Rizzi's score for House by the Cemetery is a different kettle of fish, but still very commendable in its own right. And his score for City of the Living Dead is great. It kind of builds on what he did for Flesh Eaters. You have a very similar cue for when the dead are beginning to rise, and, a thudding rhythmic beat, and this sort of like Gregorian chant in the background, and it's very similar. So they're cut from the same rotting cloth. Anyway, folks, City of the Living Dead. You know it's worth your time. Maggots aplenty. Whiskey a go-go. Keep it Celtic, folks. Stay happy, stay healthy. And watch out for zombies on Halloween. Because All Saints Day is going to be a flesh-ripping orgy if you don't kill that Father Thomas before the caskets break free. Keep it real. In the meantime, laters!